Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed with me, Zibby, and I've got my analyst of the day joining me this morning. As always, we'd love you to be a part of the conversation. So let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And you can also tweet at smooth981. The hashtag is freshly pressed 981. And we're streaming the show live on YouTube. So can catch the live stream. Just search for Smooth 981 on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe while you are on. Hello, YouTube. Welcome, Cheta. And of course, Mr. C. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Good morning, Cheta. Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, well, let's get into this story. And this one is coming from this day. Now, the G5 governors of the People's Democratic Party, led by Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State, have not yet demonstrated their willingness to publicly unveil their choice of a presidential candidate. Now, some say they've been gallivanting around the world. They've been accused of engaging in anti-party activities and making several utterances against their party. Now, they still have not been able to disclose who their choice of a presidential candidate is.
Correct, Zibby. And it's very instructive that after taking the course of action that they elected to take, they are able to publicly declare who they're following. Now, off the record, we've been made to understand that within that camp, within that G5 camp, there might be dissenting views or divergent views on who to support. Now, clearly, Governor Wike does not want anything to do with Abubakar Atiku. And he's not hidden that desire or that position. Now, where the real challenge comes from is the split between supporting the Labour Party candidate and or the APC candidate. Now, two of the governors in the G5 are Southeast governors, and it will be political suicide for them to openly support the APC candidate because they're PDP guys. Even if they're not going to support the PDP candidate, it will be better for their political careers if they were to look in the direction of the Labour Party candidate. However, we understand that it is possible that Governor Wike and Governor Makinde might be amenable to supporting the APC candidate. Now, whatever it is, we must also remember that of the 5 governors, it is only Governor Wike who is not presenting himself for the election. Governor Makinde needs a second term. And given the peculiar nature of Ibadan politics, it was a coalition of different forces that got him into office. So he has his eye largely on getting the second term. So I would say that that is his first desire more than the collective decision of the G5. Then you have Governors Autumn and Ikpeazu who want to go to the Senate. And they too don't want to rock the boat. Now, Governor Autumn has sort of publicly indicated that he might be leaning in the direction of a Labour Party candidate, but has stressed the fact that he will not publicly lead the campaign for him in Benue. So we are aware that Governor Wike has promised to identify who they're supporting. Now, it's instructive to note this. Any name he declares, will it be the unanimous decision of the other governors, or will it be the declaration of a personal choice? Time will tell. Now, where the campaign is heating up, and we're moving towards the finishing line with regards to the campaign for the election. And politics, especially political campaign, it's not a 100-meter race, it's a marathon. So candidates who appear to be lagging behind, will suddenly catch up. But it is instructive that we continue to educate the listeners that go out and get your PVCs. I think today is the last day you can get them at the ward levels. After today, they go back to local government. Ensure you get your PVC. Ensure you are up to date. You understand the positions of the various candidates. And on election day, please go out and exercise your vote.
I believe we have probably about 2 more weeks, because if we're going by what the governor said last year, he said in January they would make that position known.
Yeah,
So,
but I sense.
Does it matter?
Okay, so cheta, so there are two perspectives here. It's like a glass that is half full of water. Depending on who looks at it, it's either half full or half empty. Now you could say that beyond River State, what is Wike's influence? It's debatable. However, it will be. Sorry?
That's not my point. That's
Okay.
not my point, Mr. C. My point is, we nominally we are supposed to be a democracy. Now, I am not unrealistic, and I would not say that certain people do not have influence in a democracy. However, and I think this is very important for us to keep pointing out repeatedly, we ought to move beyond this idea of some people actually physically controlling votes, because that's what this is. All the furore around these guys and their apparent defection is the idea that certain people will sit in one corner and say this is how people will vote, rather than going out to campaign and win votes, they sit down and dictate where people will vote. That's not democracy. So this idea of governors being power brokers and influence peddlers is something that needs to die. Again, I am realistic. I know that it's in the Nigeria of today, especially with our very high levels of poverty and all of that, that is not going to just die yet. But we need to actually start working towards killing it. Otherwise, we will remain an anocracy, which is what we are.
Okay, so very quickly, Cheta, you will agree with me that in most countries, there are people who shape, in a sense, public opinion.
Yes.
And sometimes they remain in the shadows, sometimes in the public, but more often.
Yes, which is great that you use the expression shape public opinion. What I'm talking about is the fact that take Wike, for example, and I was in Rivers during the governorship election that brought him into power. People are coerced to vote in a particular direction if this is what Oga wants. That is why people are running around on account of these people. Take Wike again as an example. Wike is by rights, Wike should be politically finished. Well, not necessarily finished, but should be made politically redundant. Because after this, he doesn't have any political position. So why are we still pandering to this idea that, oh, Wike can sit and dictate how people in Abonema or Buguma will vote? That's my own point. Again, I'm realistic. I know that because he controls the purse strings of River State at the moment, that is probably what will happen. But what I'm saying is that we need to start moving away from this. And the best way to have moved away from this would have been to have largely ignored him and his travel. Make him irrelevant, and you set a precedent of making people like him irrelevant. But what has happened is that all sorts of people have come to court him. They've just made him important during this period. So we have essentially entrenched the idea that, oh, somebody can sit in his corner and tell people what to do.
All right, so let's move on to the front page of Punch. Can condemns killing of Catholic priest in Niger. Now, the Christian Association of Nigeria in Niger State has condemned the killing of a Catholic priest in Paikoro local government area. Now, a statement issued by Daniel Atori, the media aide to CAN chairman in Minna, called for investigations into the attacks and the culprits brought to book. The late Achi, until his death, was the CAN coordinator of Paikoro local government area, the dean and parish priest of St. Peter's and Paul Catholic Church in the Minna Diocese.
Yeah, so first things first, I think very important, God rest his head. This is a tragedy. And I think it's important to point out that we are back in a situation where Catholic priests, if memory serves me, I think it was up to 19 Catholic priests that were killed in various parts of the country over during the course of last year, especially in the first half of last year. I remember that there was even a case where one of them who was kidnapped in Kaduna State, in Kudenda in Kaduna, was ended up being buried in absentia because he was killed by the kidnappers and the body was not recovered. Then there was an attack on the Catholic Church in Ondo states during the course of last year. It almost appears like there's a coordinated attack on the Catholic Church, and that hurts me personally because I happen to be Catholic. And another thing that is really annoying me about this story is the fact that till now, as far as I know, there hasn't been a word from the presidency. One of the major religions in your country is getting their clerics attacked on a routine basis, and you haven't said anything. But if Obasanjo is to drop a letter, Yabbing Buhari, immediately all of them will be sharpening their pens. It shows us very clearly how they rate us, and they don't rate us good at all. For me, that is problematic. I don't know what to do about this. The Catholic doctrine preaches turn the other cheek, which I don't necessarily agree with all the time. But this is what the Catholic doctrine preaches. So
it's a Christian doctrine, actually, not just the Catholics.
Well, I'm talking of Catholicism, which is the one I'm familiar with. But one has to wonder how practical it is to be sending young men, young priests to places where you know they will be killed, because that is what this has become now. It's almost like there's open season on Catholic priests, especially in Northwest Nigeria. It's a problem. Again, God rest the dead.
All right, we've got some messages coming through. This one is from Emeka from Amuwo. He says, the reason why politicians feel they can sit down in one place and influence an election is because they're leveraging on the illiteracy and the ignorance of the people. Why do you think politicians intentionally do not develop their education sector? It only increases their knowledge and awareness of things. And okay, Lady Rose says, good morning. I don't understand why the issue of the presidential candidates that the dissenting G5 governors will adopt. I think this fixation is not helpful for the sort of change we're pushing for in our politics today. And for that, I totally agree with Cheta's views this morning on the same issue. The media should stop pushing this one man's ability to sway a state's votes because it's undemocratic. Thank you, Lady Ro, for your message. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. We're taking a quick break, and when we return, the conversation will continue. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
First Bank. You first.
This is Paul, and you're listening to Smooth Breakfast.
Okay, we're back in a minute 30.
That's long.
In every state, in every city, every town, village, and community, fast money agents are making all the difference, making things easier for all, making extra cash as a reward. You too can be a fast money agent, putting smiles on faces, and extra cash in your pocket. When I diet and you won't buy, save money, take money, make money. Don't bring yours, money on the water, fast money agents. When I diet and you won't buy, save money, take money, make money. And don't bring yours, money on the month, the fast money agents can be.
To register as a First Money agent, visit the First Bank branch closest to you. First Money, close and simple.
You first. First Bank.
Hi everyone, this is Ruby Gang, aka Solomia Ruby, and you're listening to the Smooth Breakfast Show. Do not touch that dial.
This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We're looking at stories making the national headlines. As always, we'd love to read your messages. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. NUPENG threatens to shut Eleme Petrochemicals over alleged anti-labor practices, and this is coming from Vanguard. Now, the Nigeria Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers is threatening to cripple operations of Indorama Eleme Petrochemicals in Rivers State, and this is over what it terms alleged anti-labor practices. Now, in a statement signed by its president and general secretary, NUPENG has accused the management of intentionally and unlawfully setting one union against another in its unscrupulous pursuit of perpetually enslaving Nigerians who work for them.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. Now, NUPENG once again has threatened to go on strike, and I think it gets a bit tiring when we continually read about threatened strikes and strikes are actually carried out. Now, what exactly is the problem this time? So there's a company called Eleme Petrochemicals, and they've been having union issues for a number of years. The management had allegedly or reportedly refused the workers the right to join a union. Now that was finally done and they signed up with NUPENG. Then all of a sudden, NUPENG receives a court order from a rival union that is not named in the story. And it is alleged that the management of Indorama Petrochemicals sponsored this rival union to contest and fight with NUPENG over the said membership. Now, as a result, NUPENG says we're going to strike. Now, I want to believe that when you read the act that regulates trade unions and the activities in Nigeria, that resorting to strikes is not the first option. There are usually other options, and NUPENG did refer to that when he said there was a meeting held to settle the matter, and the allegation was repeated in the presence of top management officials who did not refute the allegation. Now, the question is this, right? Whilst NUPENG has a right to have members, there should also be no monopoly. So if some of those members want to join another union, they should be free to do so. Everyone must not mandatorily belong to NUPENG. However, it's the way this has been carried out, it's the way this has been conducted. And the management of the company, if this allegation is true and they continue to refuse to provide an explanation, it is a bit sad that they're sponsoring trouble in their own company, because you would think that their primary objective is to make profits. Now, how does a strike benefit the company short-term, mid-term, medium-term, or long-term? It doesn't, because for the period that the company is shut down, you're not making any money. There's no turnover for that period. And if there's no turnover, there's no profit. But during that set period, there will be expenses. So it behoves on the company to quickly resolve this matter, and if apologies have to be made, they should do that. But more importantly, can NUPENG, especially its legal section, if they have one, start to engage the provisions, start to rely on the provisions of the law, test some of these actions in court, rather than inundate Nigerians with continuous threats or strikes. And this result
What order that the government won't obey?
Okay, cheta.
I don't have anything to say. I'm just pointing out that the government will not obey the court order.
No, so if it's an order mandating them to do something, I will concede the point to you. But if it's an order that is attached with a financial penalty, all you have to do is take out a garnishee order on the account of the CBN. The money will come out and then they will behave themselves. Cheta.
CBN that has been breaking its ways and means laws for how long?
Okay, let's separate the issues, but I'm telling you this because I have done it. So it's not something that is alien to me.
You've done it for something that was not politically important.
Okay, fair point. Next story.
Okay, let's look at some of the messages coming through. Tayo says, it's like being ordained into priesthood in Nigeria is now a death sentence. They would have to tuck away their collars because of insecurity. What a shame. PJ says, I agree that there is need to educate the voting public that they have just one vote and cannot be determined. Their votes cannot be determined any longer by just one person. Once Nigerians know and understand this, and the irrelevancy of one man calling the shots will be all too evident, Nigerians will get their PVCs and vote. Godwin from Bagada says, we the people have made up our minds on who to vote for. Wike or no Wike, Wike is overdoing this. Let's move on to the Punch. 42 COVID-19 infections recorded, federal government rules out restrictions. Now, the federal government is insisting it will not impose COVID-19 restrictions on China. And this is coming despite the rising number of infections in the country. Now, Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, who is the coordinator and technical head of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19, stated this in an interview on Sunday. He, however, said that Nigeria has raised the surveillance level within. At least 23 countries have imposed restrictions on travelers coming from China, and this is amid fears of an increase in COVID-19.
Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed has made the right decision. I completely agree with him. The truth of the matter is that the restrictions on China are a geopolitical move. I think it's very important to just dial back a little and understand a bit of what's happened here. China pursued a policy of zero COVID for going on 3 years, basically. And what that means is that they shut themselves away from the world. The effect of that was that, unlike the rest of the world, where COVID was allowed to run rampant, all of us took vaccines, and then because we took vaccines, we were able to develop some level of immunity. And COVID has now moved from being pandemic to endemic. In China, no immunity was built up. Then eventually it led to social unrest. People began to protest. And when those protests got to a certain stage, the Chinese Communist Party, which values stability more than any other thing, decided to open up. And as they opened up, COVID began to spread through the population. So it's that natural cycle. People will die, and then those who survive will build up immunity. But now they are going out into the world. As in short, the day the Chinese government lifted the restrictions, a lot of Chinese who have been cooped up in China began to book for foreign holidays. And then many of them, as they landed, they ended up testing positive for COVID. And this is where the restrictions began to come in. It was led by the US, which, as we all know, is currently in a geopolitical contest with China. The Americans are doing everything to curtail the Chinese. So I'm going to give an example of how this is political and not scientific. On Thursday, the 29th of December, the Health Secretary of the UK, Steve Barclay, was briefed by the country's Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty. Professor Whitty told Mr. Barclay that there is no benefit in restricting or testing travelers from China because COVID has now become endemic in the British population. As of that time, as of when Professor Whitty made that briefing to Steve Barclay, it was only the US, Japan, Italy, and Spain that had imposed restrictions and tests on Chinese travelers. But the very next day, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, overruled the scientific evidence from Whitty and told Barclay that it was more important for the UK to align itself with friendly nations. And so the day after that, the UK imposed restrictions on the Chinese. On the 31st of December, 3 people, Professor Whitty, a Professor Mark Woolhouse from Edinburgh University, and Professor Paul Hunter from the University of East Anglia, told the UK Observer that they don't think the UK will get any public health benefits from restricting Chinese travelers, that points of entry screening have been scientifically proven to be ineffective at controlling diseases, and that this was done for purely political reasons. The point of all of this is this. The UK is aligned to the US, so they will follow American lead. Nigeria is not aligned to the US. Nigeria is not aligned to the UK. Nigeria is not aligned to China. In practice, we're a non-aligned nation. So because of that, it does not serve our interests to antagonize the Chinese. We have, because of our history of colonialism and a shared commonality of language, we have cultural affiliations to the Western countries, but we don't have any practical alliance with them. So there is no point antagonizing China, especially given that China is our biggest trading partner. So that's it, Professor. Again, Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed made the very correct decision, and I applaud him for it.
All right, let's move on to The Guardian. Serap threatens Lawan Bajabiamila, trim 228.1 billion naira National Assembly budget or face lawsuits. Now, Serap is urging the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives to cut what they call an outrageous National Assembly budget, including the 30.17 billion severance payments and inauguration costs for members, which is what it says is the highest ever. Now, the group or the duo have been asked to act within 7 days of receipt of this publication of the documents or face a lawsuit.
Okay, so normally I would applaud or support whatever Serap is doing, but in this particular regard, I will kindly disagree. Now, they've expressed an opinion that the budget increase by 59.1 billion is excessive and outrageous. Now that's in perspective. It may be correct, it may not be correct. But what I don't get is the threat to institute a legal action. We all know that these guys, the National Assembly, is not going to reduce that budget. It's not happening. So let's be realistic and let's sort of temper expectations. You're less than 4 weeks, you're about 4 weeks away from a major election, for which some of them are contesting. Nobody's coming to reduce or review that budget. It's not happening. That's one. Now, two, any court action you want to take, you have to come by writ of summons because the issues are in contention. If there were no issues in contention and they only wanted a document interpreted, then it will come by originating summons. Now, because you're coming by writ of summons, it is crystal clear that that action will not even start before May 29th, because they will still be going through the preliminaries of exchanging pleadings and all of that. So it's an empty threat that doesn't carry any weight, because by the time, I can tell you for free, trial may not even start in that case this year. That's how bad it is. So why issue that sort of threat when you know that you can't even execute it? But again, where we can pick lessons from is, we're heading into an election. Apart from focusing on who occupies Aso Rock, let's also pay attention to the sort of people who get into National Assembly, both in the upper chamber and the lower chamber. Because if we do not do that, we may seemingly get the right man, because there are 18 of them, into office, and then we'll have the wrong set of...
All woman.
No, there's no female presidential.
There is.
No.
Is she out?
No.
Okay.
There are 18 male candidates. If we don't get the right people into National Assembly, they will frustrate whoever occupies Aso Rock, because they are charged with enacting the laws. So it is important, as we all pay attention to the presidential election, we should also pay similar attention to the people who are seeking to get into the National Assembly, because it's only when the executive and the National Assembly are working together properly and in the interest of Nigerians that the country will start to resolve some of the problems facing it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. C. And thank you, Cheta. We're out of time. That's as far as we can go on Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. And we can also keep the conversation going on our social media pages. We're at Smooth981 on Twitter. But this is it for Freshly Pressed. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on Smooth Breakfast.
First bang.
Thanks, Cheta. Have a brilliant day ahead.
Check, sir. I sent you something though.